I'll go around.
So we're a little cramped for time, which wisdom would mean I shouldn't tell you an opening story that has nothing to do with talk about time. So here's what happened. Kristen's husband Mitch, right? One of the manliest men to walk the face of the earth. Took pity on me this summer and has hired me to come and help him out in his wood shop, which ups my street cred and makes me look good, so I'm happy about it. And a couple weeks ago, we decided to go out and he needed to tear down a barn. Because that's what Mitch does with his life. He tears down barns. Yeah, I read books, he tears down barns. Anyway, so I went out with Mitch, and we were going to tear, this barn was all broken down, and there's parts of it that have already been cut away, and so we are going along and throwing chains around rafters and just pulling as hard as we can, and the barn falls down, which is dangerous and therefore awesome. And so there's this rafter system that's hung up like this. And Mitch and I look at it and we decide that if we throw a chain around the left side and pull hard, it's going to snap at the rafter and that side's going to fall. And then we're going to throw a chain around the right side and pull hard and that's going to snap and it's going to fall and it's going to be perfect, we're going to be fine. So we throw the chain around and we're standing there and I'm standing here and this is Mitch. And I chose the manliest person sitting around me to make Mitch. So we pull the chain, and when we pull the chain, not this side falls, and then this side will come later. The whole thing comes down, and the rafter that we thought was going to snap off comes right for us. Not really, but I thought it was coming right for us. And Mitch was like, whoa! And when Mitch said whoa, in my brain it went, you're a dead man! And so I wanted to get out of the way, but there was a lot of debris behind me. And so the only path I had was Mitch. Like, Mitch was the way to get out of the way. But I didn't want to, bowl Mitch over. That's a jerk move, right? So, this is split seconds. I have no time. So, I'm like, I gotta move. I gotta, and I just do this. Mitch automatically takes his arm and just throws it around. And that's how that scene went. And we got done, and Mitch was like, you like how I protected you? So there it was. My manly moment tearing down a barn. Hiding behind Mitch. All right. That had nothing to do with it today. So like Kristen said, we're going to be telling stories out of the Bible that maybe you haven't heard or maybe you didn't know, and kind of looking at, okay, why did the Lord feel like this needs to be shared with us, His people? And there are some stories in the Bible that are just amazing and that you never would have thought would be in the Bible. And there are some that are just, when you read them, they're just kind of interesting. Like there's in Joshua, when Joshua's reminding the people of what the Lord has done for them, he tells this very brief story about how in one of the Israelites' battles, so the Israelites come from Egypt and they have to take over this land, and I think in the church we kind of think that, the Israelites just kind of marched through the desert and then they walked in and the land was open and it was free and they all just set up tents and they had a great time. But really they had to fight and take over the land. It was the Lord going before them and allowing them to take the land. Well, in one of those battles, none of the Israelites even had to raise a sword because the Lord sent hornets before them and it ran the people out of the land. And the Lord at one point reminds the people this. He's like, look, you didn't even have to fight. I sent hornets before you and they did your fighting for you. Which made me think of Hunger Games and the Tracker Jacks and all that. But anyway, so that's cool, right? And that's just a piece of what the Lord, the history of the Lord and the history of how the Lord fought for His people was. At one point He's like, okay, the Israelites can't really take these people, but I will send stinging creatures that will run them out of the land and give the land over to them. So it's just amazing, some of these stories that are in the Bible. And throughout the summer, I think you're going to get a lot of pictures of, okay, here's like one story that we're going to kind of focus on and talk about the Lord. I'm starting this off kind of with a broader story and a broader look at the people of Israel in the time of Judges. So I just real quick, who here has actually read more than one or two verses because they were told to in Judges? Right? So a few. Good. Let me tell you, Judges is one of the most fascinating books of the Bible because of the craziness that goes on. We're going to talk about the craziness that was going on in the time of Judges. To give you a quick history lesson, a quick background, Moses takes the people out of Egypt. They go wandering around. They get in trouble. They're a stubborn people, and they end up wandering for 40 years. And they finally get to the Promised Land. And Moses doesn't go into the Promised Land. He dies outside of the Promised Land. And a guy named Joshua is brought up, and he becomes the judge for Egypt. During Moses' time, he actually would sit in actual judgment for the people. So, and the way he put it was, the way he administered his rule was, I am administering the rule of the Lord. I am administering God's law, and you come to me with your troubles, with the crimes that have been committed, things like that, and I will go before the Lord, and I will tell you what the Lord wants done. And it wasn't like, I'll do whatever I want and tell you what I think the Lord would want to do. He truly was in communion with the Lord. He was truly following the Lord's law and helping the people do it. He eventually, actually his father-in-law came to him and said, you can't do this all on your own, let's set up a council. And so it eventually got to where they had all these judges in place who would then hear the problems of the people. If it was a big, major one, if it was like, man, we've never heard that before, then it would go before Moses. And Moses, interpreting for the Lord, would lay out the law for the people. And it worked, and the people, they didn't have a ruler, they didn't have anybody who was over them. They had these judges who were interpreting the law of the Lord, who were telling people, this is what the Lord wants for your life. Moses dies, Joshua takes over, and it's the same thing. He lays down the law. God has Moses actually write a song to the people of Israel to remind them of what the Lord has done, because he knows that as soon as Moses, this amazing character, dies, that the people of Israel will start to backslide, and sure enough they do. Joshua fights hard his whole life to try to keep the people in line. They still fall back, but they still follow his judgment. And he raises up these elders who kind of rule with him. And again, it's not a ruling like a king. They're judges. They're people who are giving the law of the Lord to the land. But as Joshua dies and then the elders die, Israel kind of starts to fall into chaos. Now, the key thing here is that the Lord did not want a king for the Israelites. Right? A king is a guy who everybody has to pay homage to, everybody has to honor, everybody has to say, this is the man who's in charge of me, and I'm going to give fealty to him. I will serve him however he asks. And the Lord didn't want that for his people. For his people, he wanted all of that honor, all of that fealty, all of that I will serve whatever you ask, to go to the Lord. And so, really, what he was doing was saying, look, I'm going to give you freedom from having a king, from having a person who will sit on a throne and tell you what to do, and you have to do it, or he'll have his army come against you and destroy you. I'm giving you freedom from that. If you will only follow my law and what I tell you to do, you are going to be the freest people in the world. And that's what the Lord set up. But as we go through Judges, we start to see that starts to fall apart. So when you start Judges, everything's going great, and everything is just kind of going along. People are still kind of following the Lord. There's starting to be a gap, but they're still following the Lord. They remember what Joshua taught them, what Moses taught them, and they're keeping up with their oral tradition of telling, okay, this is what happened when we were in Egypt, and this is how the Lord saved our people. But by chapter 2, we're already in trouble. The tribes of the Israelites start to kind of squabble, and they start to get into fights with each other. And then they also, as they move into these new lands, right? Because the Israelites are taking over land. The Lord is giving them victory in every land they go to. As they take over these new lands, one of the big warnings of both Moses and Joshua was, do not intermingle with these people and start worshiping their gods. Every land they came to had gods, little g. They had idols that they worshipped. They had gods that they believed had power, and as they would go along, the Israelites, as they conquered them, they wouldn't kill every person that they came across. They wouldn't wipe them from the earth. And so these people were still alive, and they still had their gods, and Joshua and Moses are both saying, do not intermingle and start to worship these people's gods, because you will fall. It will lead to your downfall. And sure enough, by chapter 2 in Judges, this is what's happening. And you've got the story of... sorry, I lost my place. So the Lord sees that this is happening. He sees that these people are starting to slide. And the Lord, I found this very interesting. In chapter 3 of Judges, the Lord starts to say, you know what? These people are already sliding. I am going to let them continue to mingle with these people, and this is going to be a test on Israel. This is going to be a test to see. I'm not going to hide my people in a corner, put them in a cave, nobody will ever come near them, and they'll only have the option to serve the Lord. I'm going to let them be out there amongst all the other idols, amongst all the other things, and we'll see what happens. We'll see how strong their resolve and their faith is in me. And almost immediately, the people of Israel start to fail. As they're being challenged, they start to take this freedom that the Lord has given them, and they start to run with it. And so this is where we get into some of the crazier stories, and I'm just going to throw some of them at you because Judges is long, and I don't want to dwell too long at it. But I encourage you to go back and read them because some of them are pretty interesting. So in chapter 4, there's this big fight going on, and they're trying to take this land, but they're not really following the Lord, and they're not really listening to the Lord. The Lord's saying, "Here's what you do if you want to take the land." And there's a female judge named Deborah, and they come before Deborah and they say, "How do we take this land?" And she says, "Oh, you're going to go take the land," to this guy. And he's like, "I'm only going to go if you go with me," which I think is hilarious. It's like me hiding behind Mitch. It's like, I'm not brave enough to do this on my own. So he's like, "If you go with me, then I'll know the Lord is with me and I'll take this land." And she's like, "You are a wuss. Just go. I just said the Lord is going to go with you. But if you are afraid, that's fine. You will still get to go into the land, but the actual land is going to be handed over to you by a woman," which of course was like, "No!" He's a big manly dude. So what happens is there's the king, the ruler of this land they're trying to take over, is in his camp, and he decides to take a nap, and he goes in to take a nap, and one of his servants, who is a woman, who is the husband I lost it, but is the husband of somebody who doesn't really like the king. He's sleeping. She comes up, takes a tent peg, and just pounds it through his head. Yeah. This is the part where you're like, the Bible did what? She walked up, put it to his temple, and bam! Literally pegs his head to the ground. And he dies. Shocker. So then this dude, who was too afraid to go in and take the land on his own, shows up and he's like, "Let's kill them all!" And she opens the tent, the guy's dead, and all the Israel gets the land, but it's like, "The girl did your job." Which I think is cool. She did well. But anyway, it was so there you see just this beginning. Like, the Lord is still going before the people, but the people are no longer really trusting in what the Lord is going to do. And so they're afraid. And so you see that the Lord is like, "All right, well then I'll use other means. If you are not going to listen to me and trust in me, I will use other means because the Lord's will be done." And he uses this woman to kill. So then we go on to Gideon, and Gideon is another one who, when the Lord comes before Gideon and says, "You are going to just take this entire land," Gideon's like, I just want to check before I go rushing in because there's a lot of people who want to kill us." And 3 times he goes before the Lord and he asks the Lord to prove himself that Gideon is actually supposed to go and he's supposed to attack. But finally, Gideon is given the permission to go. Or finally he believes in the Lord, and he goes, and he takes the land, and he becomes this huge hero, right? He's just, he's this amazing guy. Sorry, I'm flipping through to find exactly. Oh, by the way, in my Bible, where the JL, who's the girl who kills the guy, I wrote, where she drives the tent peg through his head, I just wrote, "Ice cold." That was years ago. I don't even remember when I did it. But, so anyway, Gideon is one who, like, the people gather around Gideon and they love him. He's a warrior, and he's winning all these battles. And they say, "Gideon, we want you to be king." And Gideon's like, "I will not be the king of Israel. The Lord doesn't want a king. I will not be the king of Israel, nor will my sons be kings. We will be judges, and we will stand as the Lord did." So you're like, yes, Gideon is righteous. Gideon is good. Gideon is great. But Gideon has a bit of a problem. Gideon gets pretty full of himself, and he starts to believe that he actually is worthy of worship. And so he ends up actually setting up idols in his own home, and people come and they worship in his home. They're not worshiping God, they're worshiping this idol, and really they're worshiping Gideon. They're worshiping his power and his might, and it leads to his downfall, and it leads to his family name being ruined. Once again, the Lord is there, and they're striving to follow the Lord, but by bringing in all these other issues, they're falling short of following the Lord and of listening to the Lord. And this story just happens over and over and over. You just see over and over, people are wanting to follow the Lord in Judges, but as they strive to, they aren't looking to the Lord to ask the Lord to guide them. They aren't looking to the Lord to say, Lord, what is the step that I need to take in order to honor you, in order to do your bidding? So there's, and I apparently I did put it in my notes. There's another story that I wanted to share with you that, again, just to kind of highlight, and I'm skipping some of the big, like there are some big characters. Samson is in Judges, right? But we all know about Samson. He killed a lot of people with a donkey jaw, because that's my weapon of choice. And that is one interesting thing in Judges. People kill a lot of people in Judges with really weird things. Like one guy killed about 300 people with an ox prod, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a stick with a point on it that you use to get your oxen to move. And he killed 300 people with that. Samson kills a bunch of people with a donkey jaw, and then ends up taking out an entire temple by knocking over the pillars, right? That's what Samson, he gets blinded, and he's like, Lord, give me strength one more time, and he knocks it down. And the story of Samson is exactly the same as all these other stories I'm going to share with you, in that Samson was a godly man, set aside for the Lord, lived a righteous life, did everything he could for the Lord, but in the end, he let his vision of, I am doing this for the Lord, I am a servant of the Lord, fall short. And once he did that, his pride went before him, and he ended up being betrayed, and he ended up losing everything that he had. And in the end, Samson was one who said, Lord, I humble myself. I didn't do it right. Give me one last chance to make it right. And he took out his enemies. But where is it? There's this great story, and I've lost it. So I'll just tell it to you. It's so there. At one point, the Israelites are in trouble, and there's this, and the king of another land is about to take them over. And this king is like hugely obese, like hugely fat. And this Israelite guy's like, I'll take care of it. And the Bible points out that he's left-handed, which is important. So what he does is he takes a 1.5 foot long sword and he ties it to his thigh, because back then they all wore tunics. And he walks in and he goes in and he's like, I need an audience with the king. And so they let him have an audience with the king. He's like, I have a secret to tell the king. And the king's like, everybody leave! Because who doesn't want to hear a secret, right? So he kneels before the king, and as he's kneeling down before the king, he takes his left hand, reaches into his right thigh, pulls out the sword, drives it into the king. And the king is so fat that the 1.5 foot long sword goes through the king, gets folded into the king's belly. You can't see the sword anymore. The sword came out of his back. And then the guy just gets up and walks away. He's like, well, I'm done. And he leaves, and he shuts the curtain, and they all, and as he's walking away, everybody's like, should we go in? And then they're calling him, they're like, King, do you need us in there? And he's not answering. They're like, he must be in the bathroom. And so they leave him for hours until finally someone's like, he's been in the bathroom a little long. And they go in and they find him dead. And so I just think that's a hilarious story, honestly. There is, again, you see the Lord using just these phenomenal, amazing means to bless the people of Israel. And you think, how can anyone doubt that the Lord is in charge when these crazy stories are happening all around the Israelites? But still the Israelites are falling. So I want to go to the story of Micah. And Micah was a guy who, again, has this kind of checkered story. He steals a bunch of silver from his mom, like a huge load of silver from his mom. And his mother says, I put a curse on whoever took that silver. So then he's like, I took the silver, Mom, I'm so sorry. And then he says, but to honor you, I'm going to melt down the silver and I'm going to build a bunch of idols. And she's like, that's a great idea. And she's even like, praise the Lord, this is great. And so he builds these idols, and they start to not worship the Lord, but they start to worship these idols. And he builds these idols and puts them in his house, and he sets up his own son as a priest. He says, my son will be the priest, and he'll run the idols of this house. But he's still doing it under the guise of the Lord. He's like, but this is for the Lord. And then one day, a Levite who, if you know your Bible, and if you don't, the Levites were the priests of the Israelites. They were set aside, and if you were a Levite, you were a priest, and everybody knew Levites, they had a certain way of dressing and look, and so you knew a Levite when you saw them and you knew they were a priest. But this Levite's walking down the road, and Micah's like, you're a Levite. And the guy's like, I am. And he says, come in, you are going to be the priest of my household. And the priest was like, okay, sure. And Micah paid him to come in and be his priest, and Micah actually says, he says, oh, the Lord has shown favor on me, and is blessing me for the idols that I have in my house. Which, if you're reading along and you're going, you set up idols against the Lord, but you think that the Lord is blessing you? And almost immediately, so he sets up all these idols, he's got this great house. Micah's a big deal, everybody loves Micah. And then this roaming band of thieves, pretty much, comes in and they go, you have a lot of idols, we're taking them. And then they come into the priest and they're like, hey priest, why don't you come be our priest? We'll take all these idols, we'll worship them, you be our priest, and we'll just leave this Micah guy. And Micah comes running out and he's like, you can't take my idols! And they're all like, we'll beat the crap out of you if you don't let us. And he's like, you take my idols! And he leaves them be. And so now you've got this roaming band that has their own priest, and they've set up their own worship system, and they're wandering the land, they take over. And the next thing they do is they go to a defenseless village that has no one protecting it, and they completely sack the village. They kill the people, they take the women for themselves, they completely dishonor everything that the Lord has done. The Lord is not a God that sets up, we're going to sack this village and hurt these people. The Lord is a God who takes, who sins before and sets up a consecrated land. But these guys are just taking what they want. And it ends up that Micah gets nothing, even though the Lord apparently had favor on him, he thought. He ends up with nothing in this band of ridiculous people. So, yeah, and then Judges ends with this horrible scene of a man who's trying to travel home with his concubine, who was more like a wife in those days. It's very complicated. But anyway, he's traveling home with her, and he decides he doesn't want to stay in a village that is not nice to Israelites, that doesn't know Israelites. So he stays in a Benjamite village. There's 12 tribes of Judah. The Benjamites are one of them. And so he decides he's going to stay there because he figures he'll be safe. It's an Israelite village. Well, he goes there, and a roving group of people come, and he's staying in a guy's house, and a roving group of people come, and they say, hey, send that guy out, and it's a graphic. They say, send that guy out because we want to have sex with him. And the guy's like, he's my guest, you can't have him. And he ends up giving the concubine over to these people who attack this girl and literally rape her until morning, and she ends up dying. At which point the guy who had lost this girl cuts her up into pieces and sends her to all the tribes of Israel. It gets graphic, folks. It's ridiculous. And I tell you this not because I'm like, I want to shock you with what's in the Bible. I tell you this because I want you to see what happens when people start taking justice and their own lives into their own hands. And you might say, well, this is ridiculous, but I'm going to tell you, it's not that ridiculous. What's going on here is not like, oh, those Bible people were crazy. What's going on here is what happens when man takes the world, takes justice and his own life into his own hands. And so they end up killing this girl. He chops her up, sends her all the tribes. The tribes end up fighting each other. They make the vow. They're like, none of us will ever let our daughters marry into the tribe of Benjamin, and it will die out. And then they're like, no, wait, we don't want the tribe of Benjamin to die out. So then they end up having this big assembly, and one tribe doesn't show up. I guess they didn't get the email. And they're all like, oh, we wish Benjamin could have lives. Wait, what lives? They had lives. They didn't have wives. He said, and they go, wait, this tribe didn't show up. Benjamites, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to that tribe, and you're going to steal their women. And that's what they did. They ran in, they stole their women, and they repopulated the tribe of Benjamin. Literally insanity going on in Israel right now. Tribes against tribes, people raping, killing, murdering, stealing wives. I mean, it would make a really crazy movie, but it's not a great way to be living, right? And one of the key phrases that you see throughout Judges, and it starts with Micah, is that one of the key phrases is it says, in those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as he saw fit. This phrase is given over and over and over. Literally every crazy story that gets told, they stop and go, in those days Israel had no king, and everyone did as he saw fit. And then they go, and because of that, blah happened. It was a crazy, crazy time in the time of Israel. And so, but what I want to point out is, these were not like random, barbarous people who the Lord had to bring under his reign later on. These were God's chosen people. Not only that, these were God's chosen people who, if you had walked up to them and said, hey, are you doing what the Lord wants? They would have said, I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we are, because the Lord wants us to take over this land, and the Lord wants us to be free to live as we are. The Lord didn't even want us to have a king, so we have no king, and we make our own judgments. But that's not what the Lord wanted. What the Lord wanted, what the Lord demanded of these people was, I will not give you a king. I will not have a king rule over you. I will be your king. I will be your ruler. And everything that you do, you will measure against my law. And I gotta tell you, if you live by the law of the Lord, none of this stuff happens. If Micah had truly been honoring the Lord, one, he wouldn't have stolen in the first place. Two, he certainly wouldn't have taken what he had stolen and made it into idols and started worshiping it to put himself forward. You wouldn't have had entire tribes fighting and murdering each other over these crazy things, because what would have happened was, even if the attack had happened and the girl had been murdered, what would have happened was the tribes would have come together. They would have said, let's go before the judges and let's ask the Lord what the Lord's punishment should be on these people. Instead, what they did was say, oh, this group of 20 or so men attacked, raped, and murdered this woman, so we are going to wipe out an entire tribe of people. And then later on they were like, that was a horrible decision. We never should have done that. We are so sorry we did that. Now to make it right, we're going to let them go over and take a bunch of these women and put them in their camps. Because that seems like justice. That seems balance. And it just starts to spiral like that, completely out of control. Corey and I, when we play pretty much any game, very quickly get bored with the rules that are set up by society. And the other night we were playing a poker game, and we only had like $4 in chips. It wasn't like it was a lot on the line, or that we even had a lot of chips, but very quickly we were starting to get bored, because it's like, oh, let me just bet. So we started to rewrite the rules of the poker game, and pretty much you could do whatever you wanted as long as the other guy thought, yeah, I'll go with that. And we just made up these rules to this poker game. Anybody else who tried to play would have been completely baffled. In fact, no one ever wants to play games with us. It's weird. But my point is, Corey and I come up with these rules, and we think that they're really fair and good rules, and then other people come in and look at us and they're like, you guys are insane. What is this game that you are playing? And really that is what is going on with the Israelites here. They're coming up with their own balance and their own rules, and it's falling apart at their feet. So, why do I tell you this story, and why do I think it's relevant today? You might think that I'm telling you this story because I'm about to warn you, this is what the world is like. The world is full of people who make their own rules, and if you walk with them, you're going to fall apart, and you need to be careful, and you should just hide within the walls of the church because that's a safe place to be. But that is absolutely not what I'm here to tell you. What I'm going to tell you is that you all, and when I say you all, I include myself, so I should say we all, which is a weird word. We all are the Israelites. We are the people who claim to be following God, but do not wish to make God our master. We are the people who are finding other idols to put in God's place and to follow. And that's a harsh word, because what you see here is what we have seen throughout history with Christianity. What we've seen throughout history with people who claim to follow God, but don't take the time to follow the system that God set up to hear who God is. And so, it could be that every person in this room is like, no, I love the Lord and I want to follow the Lord. But you can't just say, I want to follow the Lord. Micah said, gee, I hope that the Lord is blessing me. Oh, look, there's a random person. The Lord must be blessing me. And he believed that he was. But the Lord didn't have anything to do with what Micah was doing, right? The people of Israel came up against the tribe of Benjamin because they believed that, man, the Lord would want us to get vengeance for what has happened. But then nobody bothered to say, what does the law actually do? What would the Lord actually want? They brought their own justice into it. And so many times in our lives, we say, and I am just as guilty of it as anybody else, I say, man, what I'm going to do about this situation is I'm going to come at it head on. You know, if something goes wrong, I'm going to take care of it myself, because I'm a follower of the Lord, and whatever I do, that must be what the Lord wants. But I don't take the time to stop, to pray, to seek the advice of my elders, to seek the advice of other God-following people. The Lord set up a system of judges, not so that he could have a bunch of judgmental people over his people. He set up a system of judges so that people would go and seek wisdom of the Lord from people who had dedicated their lives to listening to God. But we don't set that up in our own lives. Even though we see the destruction, the horror, the terror that comes from not, we don't set up in our own lives to have the Lord, to have people in our lives that the Lord can speak through. And so, the point of Judges, and what I want you guys to take away from this as you go into your lives, is being people of God is a wonderful thing, and it gives us a freedom that honestly and truly no other belief system, no other governmental system, nothing else gives you. The Lord gives you absolute freedom to follow Him and to listen to Him, or to decide, I'm going to do it on my own. But that freedom, we forget, comes with consequences. The consequence of listening to the Lord, of seeking